Recording in progress. That's recording. And all right, we're set. Welcome. So, yeah, first off, do you want to do the honors? Do you want to start us off with the clap, clap, clap?
All right.
Beautiful. Hey there, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. So if you're watching this video on the day that it's uploaded, then today is Friday, April 2nd, which is Autism Acceptance Day. Ever since I started this channel, I've been wanting to push myself to make more different types of content, so that's something I've been working on recently. And I also want to promote voices and give a platform to people who aren't just me. So this year for Autism Acceptance Day, I've invited my friend Zane onto the show to talk about some of his experiences. I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute. You'll learn all about him. You're going to love him. He's great. He's one of the smartest people I know. He's certainly one of the most well-read people I've ever met. He's just an all-around phenomenon. This is my first interview that I've ever conducted, so forgive me for any awkwardness, and we have a few little technical glitches in there. I don't think they're too bad. Zoom only lets us record in 360p, so unfortunately Zane's beautiful face is not very high def for this video. You'll notice that this video is longer than most of the videos I make. There's not a ton of jokes and edits and stuff in there. I wanted to give Zane the space to speak his mind, so this is like a straight up free-form interview. You can kind of treat it more like an episode of a podcast if you like. One last thing that I want to note before we get to the video. Zane agreed to come on this show and speak about his personal experiences. A lot of the things that I ask him in this video are deeply personal questions that wouldn't really be appropriate to ask someone that you don't know that well or like a coworker or something. So just please don't run around asking every autistic person you know these types of deeply personal questions if that's not warranted. But yeah, I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something. I hope you get something out of it. And yeah, enjoy my friend Zane. Take care, everyone. All right. Hey there, Zane. Welcome.
Hey, Jake.
Thanks for coming on my show. This is my first ever interview, so it's probably going to be a wee bit awkward on my part, but you know, we'll power through.
Oh, I'm privileged to be the first person you chose, and looking forward to see who else is coming your way.
So do you want to introduce yourself, sort of your own experience, what we're talking about today, and what your sort of expertise is on it?
Today we're talking about Autism Acceptance Month. I know this year they changed the advertising to Autism Acceptance instead of awareness. I have some feelings about that I can get into later. But yeah, I guess my connection to the topic is that I myself am autistic. I am diagnosed with ASD level 1, which is autistic spectrum disorder level 1, which up until the release of the DSM-5 in 2013 would have been categorized as Asperger syndrome. And yeah, so that's my connection.
Beauty. And you also work sort of in the care industry and stuff, right?
Yeah, I work in children's mental health as well as youth justice, which I don't really think those two things can be categorized aside from each other. Very seldom is an individual involved in the justice system not in need of mental health assistance, so they go very nicely with each other. So I work a lot with a lot of kids on the spectrum in both capacities, and through that, I find I have a really unique ability in that I actually comprehend what they're comprehending instead of reading a book about it. That being said, too, I actually can't really comprehend neurotypical individuals. So, it's both a blessing and a curse in the sense that I get a really nuanced insight into the people on the spectrum I work with and have to work a little harder for the people not on the spectrum I work with. So kind of the opposite of most mental health workers.
So for anyone who doesn't know or maybe doesn't have a deep understanding of it, what actually is autism and how does it work?
So autism, there's a lot of misperceptions about it, a lot of harmful propaganda, and not necessarily deliberately harmful, but just a lot of unknown. We are a very studied people, but on the basis, it is a developmental disorder. So it isn't a mood disorder. It isn't a personality disorder, which often gets associated with. It is actually embedded in the biology of the brain. I know there's a lot of theories about where it comes from, then there's a lot of sometimes harmful things that like potentially vaccines, whatnot, but regardless of how it is, I do know it does occur frequently in families. I know there's more cases of it in my family. So I think there is a strong case to say that it is genetic, although there are a lot of more components going on at the same time. What I have come to understand, and I am by no means a neuroscience, so just take this at face value of what I'm going to say. What I understand is that it is the human brain will prune its neurons throughout the development. It kind of decides what the brain actually needs to do to survive, to function, and it gets rid of the access neurons that it doesn't need. So in the literature I have read and my researching myself, the average brain prunes 42% of its neurons roughly, and the average brain of an individual on the spectrum only prunes 16%. So with those access neurons comes intense intensity. Yeah, great. Great way to say it. Just a lot of focus on certain aspects of the brain, and subsequently, whether it be through development of like not being utilized enough, so other areas of the brain aren't utilized, not developed, or just through intense utilization of one certain kind of the brain. There's just an imbalance. There are other components at work. I do know lots of studies have said we have more white matter in our brain and a less active amygdala, which is very important, as we'll get to later, for a lot of misperceptions. But because of this brain atypicality, we often struggle in social situations. And this isn't coming from a place of not feeling empathy. It's merely not comprehending. When we're so intensely thinking of something in our own brains, we might miss a social cue. So yeah, just if there's one word I could give for ASD, at least in my experience of level 1, it's that ASD is awkward. Understanding literal speech, like not understanding metaphor, allegories, and just struggling to miss lies, white lies, and yeah, just kind of a Vulcan on Earth. One of the common misperceptions about ASD is that we don't feel. We do. I am a very caring person. If I ask how you're doing and you say you're fine, I'm going to believe that you're fine and not notice that eye roll involved or nothing. So I would be like, oh, okay, evidently they're okay.
So you sort of mentioned some of those misperceptions and things of ways that people sort of stereotype autism. Yeah, what are some of those misperceptions out there surrounding autism, and how is it different than how people think it is?
I'd say the biggest misperception is a combination of a few things. The biggest thing being the empathy, in my opinion. There's a lot of belief that we don't feel empathy, which we do, but also from a completely understandable standpoint, kind of being perceived as like uncaring or even creepy. And a lot of that boils down to communication errors. A lot of individuals on the spectrum sometimes get in trouble for like harassment, and I genuinely believe they didn't see what they were doing wrong. They were just going with the society, like not comprehending the societal norms that we present. A good example of this would be like in regards to intimacy and like dating and whatnot. Just, if an individual on the spectrum asks someone out and they say maybe next weekend, and then they continuously ask, the individual on the spectrum might actually believe they're just continuously busy on the weekend and not disinterested. And I understand for the neurotypical individual that could be frustrating, but it's really about understanding that it comes from miscommunication and gullibility, that a lot of people on the spectrum do in some circumstances make others feel uncomfortable, cause harm. Going back to the amygdala piece, it's suggested that people on the spectrum actually feel less aggression, just more confusion, just getting it wrong a lot. And that isn't to say it won't cause harm subsequently, but it comes from a very different place. It's very seldom deliberate and just embedded in struggling to human sometimes.
So one of the things you mentioned when I sort of asked you to define it is that ASD is defined by the DSM-5, or the Manual of Mental Disorders. It is categorized as a mental disorder. There are folks within disability rights movements who are sort of emphasizing neurodiversity, and they sort of view the autism spectrum as a result of just natural variations in the brain, and that maybe that sort of disorder characterization is sort of unfair. What's your perspective on that?
So I actually have a lot to say about this. I think it's really hard to say, because if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. The brain, in regards to pruning, won't necessarily prune the same in anyone. So I view myself as having a situational disability, is the term I'm trying to coin. If someone else has said that before in academia, not trying to plagiarize you, thank you. We have likewise minds.
No, it's Zane's. Don't take his thing. Stop it. Leave him alone.
It's somewhere in between. In regards to it being a disability, I think it's absolutely situational when it's operating in conjunction with other people whose brains function typically. On my own, I am not disabled. If I am put to work, I am very, very productive. I got 90s in high school. I've gotten like close to the highest GPA possible at my school. I alone am not disabled. It's around other people I become. So I think it's very situational to the individual. As all humans have their strengths and weaknesses, individuals who are autistic will also have their strengths and weaknesses. When I'm alone, I, as a child, just studied and memorized the history of the Stanley Cup. Like I just sat there for hours on end reading about sports facts, and I can still rhyme a lot of them off to this day. And also at the same time, trying to be honest with people. When my cousins arrived, who I wasn't fond of at the age of 8, my cousin would say, "Are you happy we're here?" And I'd say no, because I thought we were supposed to be honest. So in those capacities, it's absolutely a disability. So it sits somewhere in between. And when circumstances arise that an individual on the spectrum may have accidentally caused harm, I think it ought to be considered. I know a lot of the disability model only focuses on the deficits, but with autism, there's a magnitude of benefits that is very seldom in a lot of different disabilities. So yeah, that's what I would boil it down to. Situational disability, situational atypicality.
Would you say it's fair to say that when you're talking about these sort of differences in the brain and how everyone has strengths and weaknesses, maybe in autistic people, those strengths and those weaknesses are a little bit more defined?
Yeah, I'd say actually that's a really good way to put it. I know one of the common rhetorics that can be harmful in regards to that is, well, everyone's a little bit on the spectrum, and it's like, no, that's just not true. If you have a heart attack, you're not a little bit dead if you came back. So that's what I would say in regards to that. And I just don't think that's really appropriate because it kind of plays down the difficulties a lot of individuals on the spectrum face. I know myself personally, I do quite well, but I leave every situation socially not knowing if I did something inappropriate or wrong or said something because I know I probably wouldn't have noticed. So I always sit in this state of anxiety of what did I mess up last? And that isn't easy, but I'm working on that a lot. I myself, I kind of got lucky. I'm really, really fascinated with human behaviors. I hyper focus. That's a aspect of ASD. I hyper focus in on things, and mine was human behaviors. So I thrive in some situations socially because I have to continuously study it. That's why I really like working in mental health too, with personality disorders and mood disorders, because I have to interact with the normal human beings like it's a personality disorder. I have to so intensely analyze everything to ensure I'm acting appropriately to the situation that I can apply that skills to different personality and mood disorders because I know that this personality and mood disorder presents in a certain capacity. So yeah, the all people have their strengths and weaknesses is a good way to put it, but I think it's a little more extreme for people on the spectrum, and there are just things that they genuinely can't fix. They can do their best, but if an individual who's neurotypical just has a poor attitude, if it's not embedded in a chemical imbalance or anything, that can genuinely be worked on. My brain can't be pruned more. So yeah, no, that's a really good way to put it, with a little more emphasis on how to work through it would differentiate for people on the spectrum.
That's great. Thanks for that. So one thing is I've come across a lot of conflicting views on Autism Speaks. So for folks who don't know, that's I believe a nonprofit organization that sort of looks to advocate for autism in a way, but I've seen criticism of them for promoting sort of a cure culture, and then also for having people who aren't autistic speak for autistic people, often parents of autistic kids. So they are probably one of the largest voices out there. I know that I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this interview, and when I just Googled autism, like 4 out of the first 5 results were Autism Speaks. So do you have any strong views on them one way or another?
This is where I differentiate a little bit. Absolutely. in the past they have produced some harmful rhetorics. I don't necessarily dislike them. I believe they have a great platform and they were working with the norms of autism at the time that they had. What would be troubling is if they don't listen to our pleas that we are capable and we can advocate for ourselves. So what I would like to see is not to dismantle the whole thing, but just say, hey, like it's a little bit cure culture-y, but I get where that comes from again. It can be really hard on a family if they have a person who requires a lot of attention to help meet their needs. But if they could just twist a little bit of the words they use, their approaches just a bit, get a few more autistic employees, I really think the platform they have is so vast that it can be used for good. So I don't want it to be taken down. I don't want it to be totally discredited. But at the same time, listen to us a bit more. And I believe great things can be done for people with autism.
A lot of potential there for sure.
Yeah.
You had mentioned sort of the level 1 designation earlier and how, so it used to be called Asperger's up until 2013, I believe. So what are the differences there in between those different levels?
So currently the levels of autism are 1, 2, and 3, and it's embedded in like care needs. So level 1 usually means can live independently, probably hold employment, will be a bit awkward like me. But quite capable, just, be aware they are autistic. Level 2 sits somewhere in between that. Like they won't necessarily need a one-on-one worker, but will really struggle with obtaining employment due to like struggling in social situations. And then level 3 is usually where you find the needs for lifelong care. Of course, these people still are brilliant, can contribute great. I know I've interacted with an individual with ASD level 3 who could hear a car drive by and knew what year and model it was. Like he had that great memory of car engines. It was exceptional.
Oh
of
my
course,
God.
the individual probably will never be able to take care of himself, and that's okay. We can accommodate that, but that's the fascinating thing about autism is how it presents so differently, and that this individual is capable of doing that. So that goes back to the disability model thing. Can we really say that's a disability? It's exceptional. But just for a further explanation, in the changes in the DSM-5, I might miss some things, but there were a few disorders that amalgamated into autism because they believed they all were different formations of autism. I might miss a few here, but I believe it was Rhett's, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, Asperger's, and classical autism, all amalgamated into one and just the level system. The reason for Asperger's in particular, the individual was named after Hans Asperger. It's come to light in recent years that like he did a lot of his research during the Nazi regime with a lot of questionable ethics, and he studied individuals with all forms of autism, but those he designated to have like Asperger's syndrome named after him were the individuals with autism that he believed could still benefit the Nazi party, and the others were to be involved in the Holocaust. So I'm really appreciative of the separation from him. But at the same time, there really was a strong Asperger community. So a lot of people really do cling to the term Aspie as much as I would like to see us move away. It is a weird thing because many of us still hold employment, are very functional in society, yet are extremely awkward. We kind of developed this niche culture, and now we have to find a new name for it, is what I believe.
That's such a fraught situation because, like that it was an empowering term was, I don't know, an empowering term to sort of rally around. And then when you start to realize the sort of eugenic roots of that's such a tough situation to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of people still use the term if people are confused why they've heard it before, but as per the DSM-5, and which will continue into the DSM-6 that I believe is coming out in a few years, if not sooner, there is no longer a diagnosis called Asperger syndrome.
Good to know.
Kind of conceited too to name a syndrome after yourself, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it is. You never really think about that, but I think naming things after yourself in general, especially if it's things that people are going to have to like live with and identify for their whole lives, kind of odd.
Absolutely.
I'm probably disparaging some very great scientists in history by slandering them like that, but I'm okay with it. So for folks who are let's say neurotypical, or maybe they don't even know about themselves. But if people want to be allies to folks with autism, what can people do to make sure that we're making things easier and more accessible for folks in our lives who do live with autism, whether or not we know about it?
Again, it would require a lot of change, but I would say I go back to what I said earlier. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. The other things that could really benefit is just how much, not necessarily we lie, but like, a lot of sarcasm in our society can really not be can turn into bad situations for individuals with on the spectrum. I know when I was very young, the first time I ever heard "go grab that person," like meaning go get their attention, bring them over here, I literally walked up to them and physically grabbed them. Of course, I was lucky. I received a lot of help. I still struggle though, understanding what's sarcasm and what's literal. I still find myself when someone says "hold your shorts" or something, I find my hand inch towards my pants. Then I'm like, no, Zane, that's sarcasm, allegory. I don't know what term you'd use. But just if we could all be a little more honest, I know that's a lot to ask for from the world, but just recognizing that being unclear or saying things that have dual meanings can potentially lead to bad situations for people on the spectrum. So speak with clarity, speak with truth, and say what you mean is really, I think, what would change the world for people on the spectrum.
That's a thing that I've realized too, like just and through conversations with you as well, is I think there's a tendency among a lot of people to be sort of judgmental about those things. Like if someone doesn't get a joke on the first try, where it's like you're, to you clearly being sarcastic, and someone doesn't get it and takes you literally, it's like, well, obviously I didn't really mean that. And you might not realize that you're kind of being pretty unfair to a large swath of people by reacting that way.
So as of now, it's believed 1 in 67 individuals are on the spectrum. That's the whole spectrum. Formerly, with what was Asperger's, it was believed to be about 1 in 250. One big thing I would like to say though is very, very little is known about people who are assigned female at birth with autism, which there absolutely are individuals in those circumstances. So personally, I would love to see an expansion into comprehending atypical brains across all genders and gender identities, because it was believed at the start to just be a thing for males, which is not the case at all. So I think we as the world really need to do our due diligence to help people of all gender identities who are on the spectrum.
That is good to know. That's a really good way to sort of talk about the process of diagnoses of ASD. So do you see sort of barriers out there to people getting diagnosed? When you say it's believed to be 1 in 67 or anywhere between that and 1 in 250, that sounds like not everyone's getting diagnosed. That sounds like there's a lot of folks sort of who have this thing and don't know it. Are there sort of significant barriers out there to getting diagnosed?
Absolutely. Of course, with all mental health, a lot of it does have to do, unfortunately, with socioeconomic circumstances as well as race and ethnicity. A lot of focus on ASD is on white individuals, unfortunately. That's another area I'd like to see expanded to people of all different backgrounds. There is a pretty significant amount of coverage available for testing before the age of 18, but like a lot of components of the healthcare system, that cuts out at 18. And for the more, going to put the caveat in every time that I don't like this term, but it's all we have, for the more high functioning individuals, they can really slip through the cracks into post-secondary education in their 20s, 30s, and then are struggling to find employment, are getting fired continuously. So that's a huge component, is that it is lifelong. A primary focus, although they are deserving of all the care and attention they get, is for individuals who need more care. A lot of attention is delegated to them, and just a slightly awkward individual who is actually autistic might just be deemed kind of awkward, and for that reason the parents never go through. They think maybe it's just an anxious kid, and then they're 18 and it costs a boatload of money to get a diagnosis, which can affect employment, disability, legal defenses. A large array of things can be helped if you have that diagnosis, and if not, they can't be. So I'd say just more just looking into it more is really important. Don't write off. It's not a bad thing to be autistic, but if you think you know someone, particularly a child, who is definitely struggling in social situations, yet is appearing very intelligent in different capacities, I don't, it's not offensive to ask to see if they could look into testing. It will only benefit them in their life.
Um, yeah, amazing. Thanks for that. So we're pretty well towards the end. So is there anything else you'd like to say sort of to the audience before we wrap up that we didn't get to cover?
Uh, yeah, I'd say the only really things I missed that are a good giveaway is what's referred to as stimming. It's just how we handle our strong emotions. So, Jake, you might have recognized this being my friend, but my stim personally is I do this kind of constantly, and it really calms me down for whatever reason. As well as I play with my hair a lot, almost constantly, and like do this, which is really weird. But so what's happening there, and there, it kind of just brings all your emotions and confusions, and it's very calming. I know a lot of individuals, and myself included, at a younger age, like flap. It just, for whatever reason, I don't know. Again, not a neuroscientist, but just know it helps. And just without being too conceited, just recognize how much good people on the spectrum have done. You know, it's believed a lot of famous scientists are on the spectrum: Nikola Tesla, Alexander Graham Bell, Einstein. So essentially, if you're listening to this, someone on the spectrum made it possible. Yes, we absolutely have our struggles, and that should be considered too. Really just being more forgiving and understanding that not everyone's brain works the same doesn't mean they can't contribute, though. So to give us a chance, and even though we already have changed the world, people just didn't realize it, I do really believe a lot of solutions on the earth can be solved from listening to people on the spectrum. I know Greta Thunberg, the environmental activist, is on the spectrum and quite vocal about it. So just don't write us off. I know it's a disability, but that doesn't mean we can't do a lot of good. And yeah, just don't necessarily be afraid of, if an individual on the spectrum talks to you and discloses to you that they're on the spectrum, I'd say the worst response you can do is, oh, but you're doing so good. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive, and just give us a chance. And I really think we can do a lot of good in this world.
Hell yeah, man. I love that. Thank you so much for sort of everything. Before we go, can I? We talked about it earlier, and we've done this, and I think this is incredible. Can I quiz you on Stanley Cup winners from the late 20th century?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's your specific year range again?
I do best post 1985.
Post 1985. All right, let's go. All right, who won the 1990 Stanley Cup?
The 1990 Stanley Cup, the
That's
Edmonton
right.
the Edmonton Oilers over the Boston Bruins in 5 games.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Let's go. Let's go 87.
87, that would be the Edmonton Oilers over the Philadelphia Flyers in, ooh, 6 games or 4 games?
Oh, that one's 7 games.
Okay, yeah,
It was
okay, I've been
4-3.
defeated.
Finally, I found your weak point. It was 1987.
Give me a shot of redemption.
All right, a redemption. Let's go 90. You know what? Actually, the best year, 96.
96, that would be the Colorado Avalanche over the Florida Panthers in 4 games.
I knew it was the Avalanche because that's my birth year, and that's like it's like a rite of passage for Canadians to know your birth year Stanley Cup team. It's kind of like your zodiac. Yes, it was the Avalanche, and it was in 4 games.
Yeah. The mine would be the Detroit Red Wings over the Washington Capitals in 4.
That's 97?
98.
98. You're such a baby. Yes, it was the Red Wings over the Capitals in 4 games. Wow.
All right. Well, you found my Achilles. My ASD Achilles heel is evidently the 1987 Stanley Cup Finals. Still got half of it right, but yeah.
I did it. I sunk you.
Just wanted to say thank you, though, a ton for having me. It's been awesome, and I am contemplating, although not for certain, that I want to create some sort of ASD awareness situation. I don't know if that would be a YouTube channel myself, or I know there's a lot of great ones out there. So if I could just plug a few of those right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know Paige Lale is a really good individual, as well as Asperger's from the Inside and Princess Aspian are all really great YouTube channels to start if you want to learn more. I personally, although I would never feel comfortable being a self-employed individual, would like to start a side hustle of ASD consulting for corporate trainings or just the greater public. So yeah, if people reach out with questions, shoot them to me and we can figure out another situation to get more information out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever it is, if you got a consulting company coming up, you got a YouTube channel coming up, whatever it is, we'll be sure to have you back and sort of talk about that and let you get your piece in there. And I'll link all those other channels that you mentioned. I'll put graphics on the screen. I'll put that in the description and everything. So people will know where to find those. Zane, thanks so much, man. Thanks for coming on to talk about this. I do want to say, the idea to do a video for Autism Awareness / Acceptance Month was your idea a year ago, right when I started this channel, and I wasn't quite comfortable with running an interview yet. I didn't know how to do that, and I thanks for willing to be my guinea pig, coming on and helping me help to get the word out, I guess. I don't know. Thanks so much for all this.
My last closing remark that I opened with is they're changing the name to Acceptance. I think that's great. We absolutely should be accepted, but we still need a bit more awareness. So let's not write that off just yet.
Absolutely. All right, buddy. Thanks so much. Love you for this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, that is it for this week's video. Please check out those great creators that Zane mentioned in the description. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me what you think, and follow my socials, which are linked in the description as well, if you would like to. All right, that's it. Take care, everyone. You're the best. And I think you're the best. Take care of yourself.